Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast, where we feature Dolphin Computer Access, in particular Simon, who is here, very much the expert in this space. So we're delighted to welcome Simon from Dolphin, and Simon's going to introduce himself in a few moments' time. But this is a really interesting topic today, and thank you, listeners, for joining in, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify, because this is a topic I've been looking forward to interviewing, if you like, talking, chatting with Simon about for a number of months. We're going to be talking today about technology supporting blind learners or partially blind learners, and a variety of other characteristic types like autism and other really interesting ways that technology can support learners in a variety of ways. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So it's blind learners, it's partially blind, autism. We're talking about how technology has been in the past, what it is now. We're going to unravel all of that. And of course, Simon's going to tell you a little bit at the end about how Dolphin can be your partner that you may want to consider for your school and or multi-academy trust. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Simon, good afternoon. Welcome to the Education Showroom podcast. How's things at Dolphin this academic year so far?
Hi Matt, Happy New Year, and thank you very much for having me on the podcast today. Yeah, things at
Pleasure.
Dolphin are absolutely great. We're really looking forward to the new year and to um,
Hit the ground running, eh?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Superb. Let's have a chat about the current and historic challenges. Now, you know from the conversations we've had in the past that this is a particular interest for me. So we talk about the past, we talk about how schools and maths have had a real challenge, a
Yeah.
real struggle of supporting learners that are blind, partially blind, learners with autism. When it comes to technology, just tell us a little bit more
Oh,
about those challenges that they have.
yeah, absolutely. So I should probably introduce myself first. Sorry. So yeah, my name's Simon, and I've been in the assistive technology industry now for around 18 years. Actually, I'm currently Chief Commercial Officer at Dolphin Computer Access. So we're an assistive technology company based in the UK. And the solutions that we provide, they're really all about empowering our young people to access and engage with their curriculum materials in a way that's accessible for them. So, removing those barriers so that young people who, as you say, are vision impaired or are dyslexic or maybe have other special education needs are able to succeed at school and really prepare for the future. Which is, what the technology is really about. We're a very well established company as well. We've been in the assistive technology space now for actually this year's our 40th anniversary, so which is great, and we're trusted by lots of schools in the UK, local education authorities, and also needs assessors. And businesses as well as we're looking to prepare young people for a future and going into higher education and the workplace as well. But you asked about the sorts of challenges, and the challenges, yes, they have been sort of historic, but at the same time are still very relevant today. And there's lots of reasons that young people may sort of struggle to access their curriculum materials, particularly when they're provided a sort of print-based format. So if we're talking about young people who are vision impaired, there's an obvious barrier of being able to view those curriculum materials clearly. So we might be needing to look into accommodations like making alternative formats available, or we might need to be looking at alternative format, sorry, such as large print or such as Braille, which can
Yeah.
be quite time consuming for educators to kind of have to rush off to the photocopier or convert materials into Braille. Often young people without any technology accommodations in place are quite reliant on teaching assistants to act as a scribe or to read material for them, or even in the wider classroom environment to be kind of like describing what's on the interactive whiteboard or working, or finding, finding electronic copies of materials as well. So from a vision impairment perspective, there's lots and lots of barriers, but then there's a much wider conversation because there's lots of young people that can kind of struggle to access print-based resources. So if we're looking at young people who may be dyslexic or have ADHD, or autistic, they may be experiencing difficulties in terms of reading those materials, in terms of decoding and processing, or just avoiding those distractions so they can actually focus on what they're reading. But the challenges always lead to an impact, and the impact can often be, young people not being able to keep up with others in class when there's barriers, to reading print-based material, getting frustrated at sort of falling behind, or the knock-on effect that in terms of motivation and engagement. And the knock-on effect also in terms of well-being, because I mean the National Literacy Trust have, kind of got research showing that young people who are the most engaged with reading are sort of 3 times more likely to have positive um, well-being, mental well-being as well, compared to those who are least engaged with their reading as well. So, the knock-on effect ultimately, where we've got young people who aren't able to engage with their reading materials, they're not going to be as well equipped to kind of prepare for exams to succeed in education, and they're going to need to be more reliant on teachers in terms of providing support. So students themselves have, have a lot of challenges, if we're talking about those different profiles of young people, but then also educators will also experience certain challenges, mainly around the kind of rising number of actually young people who are being identified as having
Yeah.
additional learning needs. I think the latest figures from the UK government was 17% of young people requiring support for special education needs provision. So it's not just about sort of the number, but as we kind of touched on before, every young person is different, and there's no sort of one size fits all in terms of accommodations to help. So whereas if a school is sort of a teacher supporting a young person who's vision impaired, might need very different accommodations to a young person who's autistic or who is dyslexic as well. So all of this, unfortunately, is kind of putting a little bit more pressure on teachers,
Mm.
and on educators. So where we're looking at solutions, really, we need to be looking at solutions that can help our young people to be more independent with their learning, so that they can read and learn in a way that's accessible for them with those barriers to accessibility sort of removed.
Yeah. Simon, so to bring this same question, not moving away just yet from this one, 'cause it's a really interesting one, but to kind of bring these examples to life, not
Yeah.
naming any schools or maths, of course, so, general examples. When you receive an email from a school or a math or a call and it says, "Hi, Simon, we need your help," just give us off the top of your head the last two, three, five kind of examples of what those schools or maths needed from Dolphin and why. What was the problem that they had, and what
Yeah.
was the kind of the solution that you helped them to implement?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I think actually, drawing on a couple of examples, we often hear that there's, sort of young people who are kind of, struggling to engage, particularly in things like phonics or reading based activities. And that kind of, causes a lot of dysregulation. Actually, a good example, we were involved quite recently in an action research project, which was in coordination with the IceEnd project. And there was a young person in this exact sort of scenario where, very much disengaged with anything literacy based, but unfortunately, where his peers are kind of reading more, age appropriate material, he's falling behind, which is affecting his motivation and his sort of well-being. So this is where the technology can really have a great impact because there's our young people are fantastic, and there's with so much potential, and often removing those accessibility barriers really helps young people to sort of flourish. So in this example, the young person was provided with a digital reader, which is a product that Dolphin create, and access a range of accessible curriculum material to sort of choose from, so that he could read in a way that was accessible for him, with the choice of text size and colors and backgrounds, and text to speech synthesizer as well.
Yeah.
So you could read and also choose from a collection, which we'll go on to in a short while. To read something which is age appropriate, which was actually a Marcus Rashford book, which was kind of what his friends were reading. And he went from a situation where very much, not engaging with literacy at all and being quite dysregulated, not spending much time in class, to actually then using the technology to, sit down and read and engage with his learning material. So and then not only that, but actually improve things like comprehension and being able to clearly articulate what the story is about and pull out some key points from it. So just removing those barriers can have such a dramatic impact, and as it is for this young person. And then other examples, for example, if we were to focus more on sort of vision impairment, where we're in situations where the technology perhaps isn't available, students can be very reliant on, as I mentioned before, on a scribe or on a teaching assistant to kind of, act as a bridge to be able to complete work, which, limits the degree to which the young people can be independent. But it was quite recently, as a young person who we've kind of worked with on a webinar called Iona, who was given the technology as part of when we were in lockdown in 2020. And she went from a situation where actually being very reliant on a teaching assistant, or actually having to rush off to the photocopier herself to make large print versions so that she could read, to then having the technology available so that she could read and learn independently as a young person. And the kind of impact of that was the teachers kind of went back and said, didn't think she was doing the work herself. And they went from a situation where it was very low expectation in terms of actually, passing GCSEs, to not only passing GCSEs, but then continuing to get a triple distinction at BTEC level as well, which is just a fantastic story. So, yeah,
Incredible.
I mean, these are the ways that the technology can really empower our young people, because our young people, they are, so full of potential, and sometimes having that technology available to remove those barriers can really unlock that potential so that more young people can sort of flourish.
Yeah, incredibly impactful for the learner, but as you've clearly articulated, incredibly impactful for the teacher, the
Mm.
leader as well, to create that accessibility and provide them with the tools to blossom and excel. Great, superb. Moving on to our next kind of agenda item is, what can schools and MAPs do for themselves, Simon, in your experience and expertise? Or what are they trying? What are they doing? What can they do themselves to try and provide this level of accessibility to
Yeah.
students?
Well, it's a good question, Matt. And what I would say is that we shouldn't be looking at any sorts of solutions in isolation, because we know there's lots of ways, as I mentioned before with those examples, that sort of assistive technology and even something as simple as providing text-to-speech access to
Yeah,
curriculum material can help in terms of comprehension, in terms of motivation and engagement, in terms of independence, and be able to independently read curriculum material as opposed to being reliant on other people on a teaching assistant. But really, there's sort of three key aspects, because we need to be looking at a model to kind of, create independence and prepare young people for the future. And so the three aspects which I'm quite, looking into is first of all making sure that the curriculum materials are accessible, and we'll, kind of go on into how that kind of works. So having accessible curriculum material makes them easier to adapt, easier to modify, by the students independently as well. And also then, as a second point, not just having the accessible curriculum material, but then also having the assistive technology that each student needs to read and learn, as well, because accessibility does mean different things for different young people. But also supporting that with training, because we need to make sure that the assistive technology is kind of embedded as a normal everyday practice in schools.
yeah,
So then, if a young person is stuck or needs some help, that there's support available. There's an ecosystem of adult support there for our young people to help them to flourish. So just as an example, actually, if we go back to sort of 15 years ago, when accessible material or digital material wasn't so readily available. At Dolphin, we were involved in a pilot project which was funded by the Department for Education at the time.
mm,
And this was all actually looking at these three aspects of the accessible curriculum material, the assisted technology, and the training, to see what would be the impact of providing this. So a pilot project was put together through a consortium of which Dolphin was involved. And the project was looking into 40 students, 20 students who were dyslexic and 20 who were vision impaired. And this was the research was evaluated by the University of Southampton, but it created part of the project was creating a collection of 100 curriculum materials in an accessible format. So then and providing then the assistive technology that the students needed to read and learn. And this combination actually had yielded some really fantastic results. So from off the back from the evaluation by University of Southampton, there were 56% of students improved their reading, 71% improved their level of achievement, and 68% improved their confidence. And as we explained previously, providing those accommodations is going to have a positive impact on students' motivation and sort of well.
Absolutely.
But quite importantly, actually, where I mention about, time, it can be quite time consuming to go off and make accommodations. The educators involved who were having to make all these accommodations had a bank of 100 resources, 100 curriculum materials, and all of them, 100% of them were saving time because they weren't having to go off and find a different resource and manipulate it or create an alternative format version. So 100% save time. And this, as I mentioned, it was funded by the Department for Education, and the results of this study really helped to sort of take note, because what we saw afterwards was the creation of a UK-wide central repository of accessible curriculum resources. So let's fast forward now 15 years, and the collection is called RNIB Bookshare. So, and it's freely available for educators in the UK to sign up to. So the school can sign up and then add students to RNIB Bookshare. And it provides access to 1.3 million titles. So those 100 texts that we were looking at sort of 15 years ago, the RNIB Bookshare repository now contains 1.3 million curriculum texts, and we're looking, across the entire education landscape. So all the way from sort of early years reading, through to kind of like GCSE level revision guides, which is really important to helping our young people to study and succeed in exams, all the way through to higher education content as well. And it's available for any young person who is vision impaired, but also young people who have what the RNIB Bookshare label a print-based disability, which includes anyone who's dyslexic or has ADHD or is autistic, or struggles to access, has barriers to access and resources when they're provided in print-based format. So fast forward 15 years, we have not only a repository of accessible curriculum materials, but we also have the assistive technology to be able to browse the collection and then read in a way that students find accessible as well.
One of the things I noted there as well is the cost savings will be dramatic for schools and maths, because, as you mentioned, the technological approach now versus the printing of almost everything. And I'm sure over a single academic year, the cost savings will be absolutely dramatic. And one of the examples that you mentioned there was about teaching assistants printing off lots and lots of manual stuff. And I'm sure that's lots and lots of manual stuff for different learners at different lessons at different times for different needs. And very, very quickly, I would imagine that there are significant and sustainable cost savings as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not just cost saving in terms of physical cost, but also opportunity cost, because how much better is that time spent not at the photocopier and actually for our teachers, doing what they came into the profession for, spending more time supporting learners with their learning, and not answering questions about I can't read this or I can't see this, actually answering questions about the learning, about the content, So this is the role of the technology, because the technology can remove those barriers so that actually we're having a better level of conversation with our young people to support them with their learning.
Thank you. So we've covered the challenge that schools and maths have. We've spoke about some really great, interesting examples and some great case studies, and thank you for sharing the work with the DFE, which is brilliant. We'd love to learn now about Dolphin. Would you mind just giving us a rundown of how you're helping schools and maths, the impact that that's having. So we'd love to hear a little bit about your organisation, Simon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much. And there's if I talk about a couple of products that we offer at Dolphin, which really do help to bridge those gaps and help students to read and learn. So firstly, where we're looking, we mentioned before that we need to be looking at solutions which are helping students to be more independent, but also this idea that actually there's lots of young people who may struggle with reading in print-based formats. So we provide a product called Easy Reader Education, and this is a flexible reading accommodation to support students with a variety of different special education needs throughout a school or a college. So this includes a reading app, which is Easy Reader, which is free to download on any device. So your iPad or iPhone, an Android device or a Windows based device. It also, if your school is a sort of Google school, it also works on Chromebooks, as long as those Chromebooks are allowed to run Android apps. But what's important is that Easy Reader provides a central access to all of your curriculum material, whether that's curriculum material from RNRB Bookshare, so it allows students to log into RNRB Bookshare and to browse that collection of 1.3 million titles, or access teacher shared files as well. So if teachers are sharing files on Google Classroom or Microsoft OneDrive or Education, they can all be brought in. So you have a central gateway and a single point of access for all of the students' curriculum material. And then once you open the curriculum material, students have a flexible reader which can be made accessible for them. So that's with the students' preferred text size, screen colors. They can choose from the different text-to-speech voices to have it read back and each word highlighted. If we have students who are struggling with focus and attention, we can limit it limit the reader to show 5 lines at a time, or 3 lines at a time, or 1 line. We can really help create a much more immersive reading experience as well. And also do the sorts of things that you'd expect to do with a digital-based reader. So it's just skipping to different chapters or adding bookmarks with little annotations in and things like that as well. So this is a great way of sort of helping in terms of helping our young people to be more independent, both in accessing their curriculum, finding their curriculum material and reading it in a way they find accessible. Being able to read more age appropriate material and keep up with everyone in class just by being able to read in a way that they find accessible as well. But ultimately, we're talking about improving their engagement and their motivation so that when they come to take their exams, they're much better prepared than they would be without any accommodations sort of in place. We're also, with Easy Reader Education, providing a bridge for reading at school and at home, because when a student picks up their device at home, they can continue reading just as a student who maybe is more neurotypical and doesn't have or doesn't have challenges reading print-based material can just pick up their book and continue reading. A student using Easy Reader can do exactly the same and just pick up where they left off with their accessibility preferences saved on a different device as well. But it's also resolving barriers for teachers as well, because obviously we've already spoken about the sort of time savings and being able to, not have to rush off to make these accommodations to help students to be more independent. But the teachers also get a dashboard, which means it's really easy to add students to their education, Easy Reader Education plan, and also monitor student reading activity so that we can actually start to have a little bit of a better conversation about, are these accommodations having a positive impact for our young people? Are they helping people to read more as well? And now if I go back to where we were talking about the kind of 3 key points, we were talking about accessible material and assistive technology, but also the training. And so with Easy Reader Education at Dolphin, we do offer CPD training. We have an online course called Accessible Reading for Educators. And this goes through a lot of the information that we've kind of been through today, just to make sure that we can, kind of create that ecosystem of adult support for our young people, and to make sure that actually accessible reading is a normal everyday practice and not something which is isolated into one corner of a classroom or of a school, but it's a normal everyday practice and just a different way of accessing curriculum material. So that's easy.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thanks. That's Easy Reader. And an easy reader, as I mentioned, is a flexible accommodation to support lots of different students in a setting. But
Yeah.
if we go back to the topic of of today's podcast, which is more around vision impairment, and we do offer a product called Supernova, which is actually going, it includes Easy Reader, but also goes beyond to resolve more barriers for students throughout the school day. So Supernova provides magnification and screen reading for Windows-based devices. And this enables young people with a variety of different levels of sight to be able to make their Windows device, if it's a laptop, computer, for example, make that accessible, whether they need magnification, different colors, or speech, or even connect a Braille display to read and write using Braille. It means that they can complete their work because they can use Microsoft applications like Microsoft Word independently, so they're less reliant on a teaching assistant acting as a scribe, so they can complete their work independently. As I mentioned, it includes Easy Reader as well for vision impaired students, so they can get access to all of their reading materials to read and learn in a way they find accessible. But there's also facilities within Supernova to help improve the general accessibility around the classroom. So, for example, if a teacher is sharing content on a whiteboard, it means that a student can view that content on their screen, on their laptop screen, without having to sit to the front and struggle,
Yeah.
or reliant on a teaching assistant describing to them what is on the whiteboard screen. They can be more independent. Or if there's print-based resources, our Supernova Education Kit comes with a camera, so then the students were able to view those print-based resources and zoom in and view them in a way they find accessible, again, without the teacher having to leave the classroom to go to the photocopier. Actually, the latest version now also includes AI image descriptions, so that if a student's interacting with graphs or graphics and is on print-based resources, they can have descriptions of those, so they get full accessibility to content which actually, historically hasn't been accessible.
Yeah.
And just like with Easy Reader, there's again CPD, online CPD available to support teachers, so that again we can create this network of adult support, and really help our young people again to be more independent with their learning, to succeed at school, and then prepare for the next steps in the future as well.
Thank you very much, Simon. And I'm sure the listeners of the podcast on Spotify and YouTube are thinking, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'd like to pick up on something that you've mentioned, or carry on a conversation, or learn more, have a look at one of your products or both of them. Contact details. How can the listeners get in touch with yourself, Simon, please?
Absolutely. So, first thing I'd mention the Dolphin website. So if you go to yourdolphin.com/education, that'll take you to education focused landing page, which has some information about Easy Reader and about Supernova on there as well. You can contact us by phone. Our number is 01905 754 577. Or if you prefer to email the team, you can email info@yourdolphin.com, and the member of the team will get back to you as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Autism, dyslexia, blind, partially blind. If you're looking for a solution that's incredibly trusted, very, very good value for money, you've met Simon today, everybody. You've listened to him, or you've seen him if you're on YouTube, and we are huge advocates of Simon and his organization. And Simon, the great work that you guys do and continue to do. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Thanks.
Listeners, thank you very much for dialing in today. Simon, thank you for joining us as this week's podcast special guest. And if anyone does have any questions for Simon, drop him a message, have a look at the website, get in touch. And as I said, fantastic organization, great products. Thank you so much. Keep your suggestions for podcasts coming in, what you would like us to focus on, hot topics, discussions, new angles, technology. Keep your suggestions coming. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you for next week's podcast. Simon, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Matt.